Today we're going to talk about whether or not you should refinance or use a HELOC to pull the equity from your home. Now, I've done videos on this in the past, and recently, for the last year or two, the answer's been refinance most of the time. That's changing. I'm going to talk about why. But the reason I'm doing this video again is I have been getting asked the question a lot lately. And so, and it's in my Facebook group all the time. And so kind of what I've done with a content plan over the last year is when I get asked a question a few times, I'm like, okay, I need to address that. That way, when someone asks a question, I can send them to the video and they can get the full answer and a good answer rather than like the shorthand version just because I'm tired of answering the same question or, you know, not feeling it that day, right? So here's the thing. First off, what is a refinance? A refinance is where, let's say you have a $100,000 loan on a house and the house is worth $200,000. So you get the house appraised, it appraises at $200,000. And then the bank says, hey, we'll let you refinance, meaning we will give you a new loan at 80% of the new appraised value, so $160,000. And then we will pay off your old loan. So that one's gone, so that $100,000. And then now you have $60,000 extra, you know, minus some closing costs and fees, whatever, that you can keep and you'll just pay interest on the whole thing. So it's basically like somebody giving you a loan on the equity in your house. And we'll talk through some pros and cons with that, but but the one nice thing with this is that a refinance is not a taxable event. So you pull that $60,000 out, you're not gonna pay taxes on it, at least not until later when you sell the home, and then you'll recoup that piece as well from your original mortgage, right? So a HELOC is a home equity line of credit, which is a line of credit. So think of it like a credit card attached to your equity. So that same house, those same numbers, get a HELOC up to 80% loan to value. What that means is you'd still have the $100,000 loan, and then you'd have a $60,000 line of credit on top of that that you could utilize. And a HELOC operates in a way that you don't pay any interest on it until you use it. And then let's say you use $10,000 of it. Now you'll pay interest on that $10,000 until it's paid back off and it's reusable. So pros and cons to both. The HELOC, like I said, is reusable, so you can do it and pay it off and 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 whatever. And then the refinance is, you know, not that way. The moment you take it, you're paying those interest payments off. Now, yeah, it's probably a 30-year amortization period, so the payments may not be crazy high, but you're making those payments. Even if you have all $60,000 sitting in the bank waiting on an opportunity, you're still making those payments already. And then once you use that $60,000, that's it. Like, unless you actually pay down the mortgage and refinance again, you're not able to reuse it, right? Another benefit is that the HELOC is simple interest, unlike the mortgage, which is amortized and compounding interest. So what that means is, again, that $10,000, that's what you pay on. When you drop it to $9,000, that's what you pay on. It's not a fixed amount that you're paying interest on, like the HELOC, where even if you use the $60,000 and recoup the $60,000, unless you pay off that loan, even if you pay off that loan, that payment is still gonna be the same, right? And you're still gonna have very similar terms until you do refinance again, whereas the HELOC is a simple interest rate, so it's better and it's not amortized. And so it's just overall the way calculated interest on a HELOC works is better than calculated interest on a property. Now, the reason I was recommending refinances for the last year or two is that interest rates were so incredibly low that it just made sense to lock in a fixed rate 30-year, 25-year, you know, depending on, most of them were not investment properties, so 30-year loan at 2.25%, 2.5%, 3%, 3.5% interest for the long term. You pull that equity and, you know, that's a pretty good position to hold. And so a lot of people did that refinance a year ago, 2 years ago, pulled some equity, have a really good interest rate locked in. Now, what's happened over the last year or two, though, is that property values have still climbed. So let's say you refinanced a year and a half ago, you have that $100,000 loan with 2.25% interest rate for 30 years fixed. Now your house is worth $200,000 and you could pull out another $60,000 and you're thinking, wow, I'd love to tap into this equity, but interest rates have gone up now. So if you refinance, you will now be paying a $160,000 note at the new 4 or 5% interest rate, which means you'll get rid of the amazing 30-year fixed 2.25% rate that you had. And that means you're paying an extra 1.5% to 2.5% interest for the entire duration of this 30-year mortgage, which if you look at the overall interest paid over the period because of how amortization works, that is a fortune. It will cost you an arm and a leg. I'm not gonna do all the math here to whatever, but it is a fortune. Go look at a mortgage calculator, you'll go bug-eyed. Whereas if you pull a HELOC right now in that same situation, your HELOC interest rate will definitely be higher, and they adjustable rate most of the time, so it'll buffer and whatever, and you'll pay a decent amount on that HELOC, and you'll pay more than what your refi rate would be, but only on that $60,000 or whatever portion of that you actually have used recently. The geese are going crazy. That original $100,000 is still locked at 2.25% for 30 years. So you're not paying an increased rate on that. You're just paying on the 60, and only when you actually use the 60, as you pay it down, you're not paying on it anymore. So that's the best way, in my opinion. Leave that rate, use a HELOC right now. Now the downside is if the market crashes, banks can definitely say, hey, we're closing your HELOC out. So there is that risk. But again, as far as financials go, it makes way more sense. Like, don't touch that really good 30-year fixed rate. If I was you, I would just never touch that rate again. You're not gonna see those again, so keep them. Now, the one alternative here that I would throw out there is that you could get a second mortgage. So you could leave that first mortgage in place, and then instead of refinancing it, get a second mortgage for, that $60,000 or whatever, which would be similar to a refinance, but would leave the original interest rate on the first one. That might make sense to some people in some situations. Overall, right now, I'm definitely leaning towards the home equity line of credit route as the better option because it's reusable, it's flexible, you're only paying on what you've actually used, and you're leaving that long-term fixed debt in place. So that's kind of my thoughts on this right now. I think I had one more point. Let me check my notes because I do bullet out these and make, thought about stuff. Yeah, so I mean, basically it's just the overall concept, right? Look at your current interest rate and loan term and make sure that your overall payments are gonna be better if you refinance. Otherwise, don't do it. If you do the HELOC route, unless you're gonna be better off long-term with the refi as far as like dollar per dollar. That's my thoughts. Now, that's gonna change, right? Because it changes with markets, and it changes with interest rates, and it's gonna be based on your personal decisions and whatever. And honestly, if you don't have something to use the money for, or that you're gonna use the money for that's like a good investment or smart, just leave the equity until you figure that out. Be like, the HELOC's great because you don't have to use it, you don't have to pay for it right away. But if you're gonna get a HELOC and you have no idea what you're gonna use it for, and then you're the type of person who's not been historically good with credit cards, and you might just go and write a check from that HELOC to buy a car or something you don't need, a PS5, whatever, then I would hold off and just save the equity, because that equity is gonna be building and earning a return over time too, and it will keep you from being over leveraged so that you'll have a huge equity buffer if there is a downturn in the market, which is always a possibility. Markets are cyclical, right? And the name of the game with real estate and all investing is to hold for the long term. So that's my thoughts. What do you guys think's the best route right now? And did I miss something? Throw it in the comments if I did. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and as always, follow along on all social media channels if you want to learn how to build wealth in the military.